All right, remember this matter dates back, and the person asking the question of President Cyril Ramaphosa in Parliament several years ago was now One South Africa movement leader Mmusi Maimane. He was then head of the DA. Also, as this progressed, the EFF joined the application, and it said the documents remaining sealed would encourage corruption. So it wanted the court to force the CR17 campaign, or the president himself, to be transparent about who donated to his campaign that led to President Cyril Ramaphosa becoming president of the ANC and then of the country. The EFF said that keeping those sealed would encourage corruption. We're now joined by both those players, One South Africa movement leader Mmusi Maimane and EFF spokesperson Vuyani Pambo. Thank you both for being here. Mr. Maimane, let me start with you. The court found both you and Ramaphosa at the time you were talking in Parliament. I thought you were talking about a payment to his son. Later, it turned out the payment was actually to the CR17 campaign. Therefore, he didn't know, he wasn't misleading Parliament. But it was all very confusing. How did that mix-up occur? Take us back.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. More than anything, we'd been given an affidavit that said that the president's son had benefited and had received a donation of 500,000 from a company at the time. If you remember, Bosasa was embroiled in state capture, had already made donations to various members of parliament at the time. And furthermore, we wanted to know what was the benefit to the president. So in this instance, what is factually incorrect is that the money went to his son. What is factually correct is that it actually was to the benefit of the president's campaign to be president. So that fact doesn't change. And when asking the question, the president clarified that it wasn't his son, but it was in fact him. But we still then remain with our looming question, which is to say, if, like the Chief Justice said today, that in fact there is a personal benefit in the matter, what was the benefit then to a company like Bosasa who was engaged in state capture?
Yeah, so either way, we know that Bosasa gave money to his campaign, CR17, and was also employing his son as a consultant. Either way, you say it was a conflict of interest. But is there any evidence that the president was returning any sort of favors?
Well, there doesn't need to be. I think that this then goes to the second question, which is, it is not up to the president to prove or disprove whether there's a conflict of interest. It's up to us to decide that. We, in the same way as we could ask the question of the Guptas when we were dealing with Jacob Zuma, I think it becomes important to ask the same questions of Bosasa when dealing with this current ANC, because it's not just the president who then got a donation from Bosasa. You'll remember that in the State Capture Commission already revelations have come allegedly about Nomvula Mokonyane. There have been many others about Malusi Kigaba. There have been many others about even Mervyn Dix, and many others that have come onto this Bosasa gravy train, as it were. So I think the first question is, when the president became president, you'll remember he moved what was then the former state security person to then the Director General of Correctional Services, where these contracts that were adjudicated to Bosasa. To eliminate that, my call would always remain that it would have been prudent for the president, upon being elected as president, to, in his declaration of interest, which sits at the union buildings and ordinary citizens can apply to go view them, for those to have been put there in the interest of transparency, so that it can never be said that there was a conflict of interest or not. It will be common knowledge for all citizens.
Okay, Mr. Pambo, let's bring you into this conversation. You obviously feel the same, that the president should open the books. But what if Bosasa was donating to everyone? The ANC, other parties, both presidential campaigns in this case. Remember, he was up against Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. They seem to want to give money to whichever politician would take it. So does that not expose the president politically, if we focus on CR17, and not the others who may have received money?
Well, the reality, thank you very much for having us, Francis. We hope this time you will give us time to speak, and that we won't be interrupted and you won't speak over us like you did in the last interview.
Okay, I will try my best, Mr. Pambo.
With that said, We must first start by welcoming the court ruling today. The Concord remains the apex court, and as the EFF, we respect the courts. But it must also be said that we do not agree with the part where it says that Cyril Ramaphosa did not have anything to do with the running of the accounts. And the reality is that we do have evidence, as you are asking Maimane whether there's any evidence. There is evidence of such, and this evidence is demonstrated by Cyril Ramaphosa himself in Parliament when he said that he donated or gave money to two EFF members of Parliament at the time, one of which was going through a bereavement at the time. Ramaphosa donated to them from the CR17 account. And so there's no more evidence that we need other than that, with him himself publicly, openly saying that he donated because these are his colleagues and so on. And he felt that people, when they're going through a time of need, he could, offer assistance. So for us, that's a foregone conclusion. But we do respect the outcome of the court judgment. But we still remain, steadfast that these CR17 documents must be unsealed. It cannot be that we have a president who has received money, so much money, and we do not know who are the people who have put that money into his campaign, especially with so much power that he wields. We must know what informs this decision, and this is what is the problem with this country. Transparency is what we must be fighting for, and in this case, Ramaphosa is working against that. He went into government with a ticket of saying that he wants to fight corruption, that he's a transparent president, but he's doing the opposite. And the courts are now being found to be part of that nonsense by sealing documents which ordinarily should be public knowledge. That's why we have...
Mr. Pambo, back to my question. What about the campaign of Lindiwe Sisulu? What about the campaign of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma? Should they also not then open their books?
Absolutely. It too must be revealed. Those books must open up because we must know. But what matters is, and this is a diversion from your part, because the materiality of the question is that, or rather the reality of the matter is that Cyril Ramaphosa is the one who's president, is the one who's making decisions. Sisulu and Nkosazana are not presidents. They are not wielding as much power as Cyril Ramaphosa. But equally, all of them, whoever gave money to them, we must know as government, so that we know that this minister in this department is taking decisions informed by these donations. So we must be able to find that a link between the donors and the people that are now getting tenders in their department. I think that is going to assist in the fight against corruption. So it doesn't matter who it is. We're not just fighting Cyril Ramaphosa because it's Cyril Ramaphosa. We're fighting to get these documents unsealed because these documents are the source of corruption. They are the reason why Cyril Ramaphosa makes some decisions that you would see with the vaccine. The part of those people who are in those documents...
Can you prove that, Mr. Pambo? Can you make a link between the vaccinations and donations?
It won't help, Francis. We need them to be released by court because the gravitas of those documents only comes with the court officially releasing them. If I tell you, it seems like gossip. So that's why the EFF...
that's why I'm questioning, because you've just raised it.
No, it's not the first time we're raising it. We've been raising it. We're saying to you that our strong suspicion and our strong sense is that Aspen is part of those documents, and that's the reason why the decisions are taken the way they are taken. So we are saying to you, let's allow the courts to take, the law to take its course, but equally, we cannot take away the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa is president now, so you can't compare him to Sisulu or
Okay, Mr. Pambo, I'm cutting you off because we're running out of time, and I have to, in fairness, give Mr. Maimane one more chance before we wrap this up. All over the world, Mr. Maimane, Joe Biden's son is an example, Trump's whole family, Jacob Zuma's son being employed by the Guptas. It seems to be a way for politicians to receive favors through their families without being seen to receive favors, without needing declarations. The family could be a problem, but on the other hand, if you're a politician's child, it's surely unfair to say you can't do business with anyone. How do we achieve a balance there?
Well, first and foremost, especially in a country riddled with corruption, I think it would be unfair to say narrowly that for anyone's children to be employed, they can only do business with the state. They can do business with anybody else. South Africa's GDP, state's contribution to GDP is only 40% at this point in time. So there's an entire economy upon which people can participate. Where my biggest challenge is that there's a triangle of corruption. And the triangle of corruption works as such. You get a company that sponsors a politician's political bid. Once that politician occupies office, they then in turn are able to adjudicate contracts that benefit that company, and that company can then continue to be the benefactor not only to the person, but also to the person's family. So it is undeniable the fact that we need to break that.
Okay.
But my proposal, Francis, is simply this, that we have to introduce direct elections in this country. You cannot spend millions and millions of rand convincing 4,000 people to vote for you internally, whereas that money should have actually been spent convincing South Africans to elect their president directly, because that way we wouldn't have this conflict of interest that we are facing up to.
All right. Thank you both of you for joining us tonight. There was One South Africa Movement founder Mmusi Maimane and EFF spokesperson Vuyani Pambo.